Welcome to Show Me the Proof, Get to the Point, the B2B marketing podcast where we show you the proof in the form of case studies and success stories. And we get straight to the point with your hosts and founders of Proofpoint Marketing, Mike and Gabby Grinberg.
Welcome to Show Me the Proof, Get to the Point. We are so excited to have Ben Reese with us today. Ben is the marketing director at DCS, Dimensional Control Systems. And Ben is going to talk to us today about a really awesome content strategy campaign, SEO and content campaign that he implemented at DCS. So Ben, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Gabby. Thank you, Mike, for having me.
Yeah, and well, let's get right into it. Can you give us a brief overview of the campaign? But before you do that, we like to start with the end in mind. So what did this campaign produce? What was the end result of this campaign? What did it do for your team and the folks at DCS?
Yeah, so obviously with every company, they want your marketing team to make leads, right? That's at the end of the day what they're going to measure you on. So after implementing this, it's been a few years now that we've been doing it. We've increased our revenue and our lead generation that comes in from our inbound campaigns from about 3 to 5% of our mix to about 52% of our new prospect mix. So a great deal of our new business now comes from this general campaign that I started. It's also increased our web traffic by an enormous amount. I think I told you about 1,000%. And those leads we get almost one lead every business day now when you average it out. And for a small business like us, who we don't need to close a lot of deals during the year because our average deal is fairly robust. So that's a huge amount of business. As a B2B client. That's quite a bit.
Yeah, that definitely is. When you talk about the 52% of revenue, I'm assuming we're talking about like 52% of net new, like marketing sourced revenue.
No, so that's basically our overall new product sales. So I think we're at like 52%. Inbound and web leads, and then I think we've got 40% come in from our existing customer base, and then we have roughly 10% from our other campaigns, which includes events and some of the other things that we do. We've really found that the inbound is very, very impactful because you're not interrupting clients. You're also letting them guide themselves through the sales process, at least the initial stages. You do want to be a part of it, as anyone who's taken anything in sales knows that if you're not there early, you're going to let somebody else determine what their what the requirements are, which is a good way for companies to hedge out their competition early. But it does allow those initial stages to be taken by the client. And most customers, especially in a B2B, you're working with educated people who are busy. So they don't want someone constantly badgering them and constantly filling their inbox with stuff, right? They want to be able to kind of take it at their own pace. Mm-hmm. And many of them have been assigned an investigative task by management. So it's something they have to do, and they want to be able to look at it from their perspective and not have a salesperson, possibly use smoke and mirrors or pressure sell them or force them into a decision, and so this really allows them to then convert when they're ready to talk to a salesperson, when they've got questions and they kind of understand what it is you do based on the content then they've been able to view and consume.
Absolutely. And I think, especially over the past 18 months, but maybe even before that, we're seeing so many changes in the way that marketing and sales are working together and approaching their ideal customer personas. It's not just, hey, sign up and then I'm going to get you into my system and we're going to start spamming you. But it's like you said, it's having a strategy that that brings them in, that pulls them in, rather than pushes it out to them. So I think that's
push marketing, and that's what a lot of times we refer to as interruptive marketing, right?
Yes.
If you're on the page and the whole screen blacks out for your pop-up, and you're constantly sending them stuff, and you're trying to get into their text messages, and you're fighting so hard for their top of mind, right? That you've now burned out your relationship with them.
The goodwill, right?
Negative impact based on that. Same problem you have if, for example, if sales dives in too early and tries to force sell them. A lot of times, even if it's something they need, they haven't come to that realization that they need it yet, but they just have this person they feel like is bearing down on them, and you've now burned the opportunity without them ever even looking at the product, because they're so busy becoming defensive and fighting back against what they see as an invasion, that they haven't paid attention to anything that's been shown or said.
What
is the definition of lead for you guys in terms of?
So that's actually. And it does feed, Gabby, into what you were coming towards. So I work in an engineering firm, so there's a lot of everyone is very specific on vocabulary, which is good because I am as well, right? And so we have what we call prospects, we have leads, and then we have customers and clients. And those are the three big pillars. There's stages in between, but those are the major pillars. And a prospect is somebody who showed interest, right? So maybe I'm doing a drip campaign, or they've signed up for one of our webinars, or they've downloaded some content. And I have a pretty hands-off style when it comes to our prospects, because I want them to want our product and to be interested. And one nice thing about being in kind of the product mix that we're in is, even if they're looking at one of our competitors, a lot of times they're going to want to find competing products to that. And there's not a ton of players in that field. So, we might even come up in that kind of arena. A lead is somebody who's asked for content by a salesperson. They now want, or they want either a quote or a demonstration of our products, or have a conversation with a salesperson. That they are now ready to enter the buying process. And oftentimes, we'll soft qualify even that, check, okay, well, do you know what this is that you're looking into? Do you have any initial questions? I can a lot of times use a video to replace an initial demo. So I'll send them a video of a kind of a recorded demo that we did as a webinar. So it's almost like a conversational demo. And then we'll try to get them on the line with an expert on the product and a salesperson. So instead of you just showing the basic nuts and bolts, now we're talking about very specific question and answer about their product, their process, and about them. And we're not going to go through a whole 2-hour session of just hammering them with questions. We're going to say, here's what our product does in its basic configuration. All right, show your team, schedule a time that's convenient for you and your team, and we'll have our person with some live stuff ready to answer and show answers to your questions. So we can do it direct. And we'll do a little research and try to have a model of something related to what they do. So it's not, like they make cars and we're showing a phone,
So I love what you're saying in terms of this kind of, we'll call it a pre-qualification almost, where it sounds like the marketing is sort of owning that for any inbound, right? And then are you also then, like, let's assume they respond to that email with some questions. Are you fielding those questions, or does that at that point get passed over to sales?
So I try to hold on to a prospect as long as I can before making into a lead. Everyone has horror stories about salespeople, but when it comes to my salespeople, we have a small sales team that when they get somebody who's a little farther down the sales cycle, they'll work their butt off to make, to move heaven and earth for those clients. But our sales cycle is very intensive. There's a lot of touch points for it, which means it's hard to juggle a large amount of clients. So if someone's asking basic product questions and they're not ready to enter the sales cycle yet, I don't want them, they've got other things they need to be doing. So I'm trying to keep those people from gumming up our sales until it's time for them to start making real progressive moves. So yeah, I will do my best to handle those and bring a support person in to handle those questions. In fact, so much to the point that we have a live chat on our website and I manage it directly from my phone, and I work, I'm a manager in the company. So when you live chat, you're not talking to some third party group. You're not talking to a support person that just joined the company. You're talking to somebody that can literally say, okay, hold on, let me walk into the CEO's office and ask him that question.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. It's interesting that you said that, Ben, because when I went in preparation for the show, I went to the website and sure enough, your chat box popped up and there was your photo. And I thought, oh, well, that's interesting. I thought Ben was director of marketing. What's his picture doing there? And so that really helps to illuminate that for us and for others listening, especially if you're in an organization like yourself, where DCS is a very niche software organization. You are servicing companies that also have in very specific industries. And I liked what you said in that you have a very small but mighty sales team. Right. And really to make sure that you're providing the best experience both for prospect to lead, that transition from prospect to lead, and also for providing the best MQLs to your sales team. You're hanging on to these prospects for a really long time, and that's really refreshing both to hear that and perhaps we can get into later on in the show a little bit more about your strategy on how you're hanging on to these prospects.
One warning before we go there, and that's a volume warning, right? So the volume of chats is a couple a day. If you're looking at, if you've got a much larger market, you've got a much higher volume, our process just isn't reasonably doable, right? But because we're niche enough that we don't have a huge volume, but each particular sale is very important to us, it means that we want to spend more time on each particular prospect or lead and make sure that they don't have to jump through hoops, right? I mean, there are a couple of ISP companies that I won't drop any names, but some of them rhyme with RTT, and if you try to call a customer support call in, you're going to be bounced around 6-7 times. They can be very, very frustrating. If you have a simple question that you need a yes or no answer to,
right,
before you can move forward, why not just have somebody who can answer those questions, who's qualified, picking up that phone, or in this case, the chat, on my phone,
And that's a great distinction to make, because you're right. There are certainly some organizations where having a single point person is maybe not feasible or not realistic.
I do have a small team that manages it, but I try to be like the initial touch. They all come to me first, and a lot of times I'll be like, okay, well, that's outside my wheelhouse. So I have somebody from the support team, and I have someone from IT that also kind of like keep an eye on it. And so that way I can get them immediately roped in. So instead of me having to be like, okay, I'll have them call you back in the next 3 days. It's like, all right, give me 1 second. I'll knock on a door, and they just jump right into the same chat.
Yeah.
No, but that's what you bring up is really important. It's taking us a little bit outside of what we're talking about, but I think it's important to highlight, because the resourcing and the staffing for live chat is extremely important. Like you said, like what you guys are doing probably won't work for a larger organization. That's a different staffing model.
Yeah.
But you still have to staff for it appropriately. Otherwise, it could actually be a detriment rather than a help.
Very much.
Because if somebody has to go into an automated bot that says, are you here for this, that, and the other, and it's pretty much just a form and a matter of a chat bot, that doesn't actually help. You're not answering any questions. Or if you have to wait for 15, 20 minutes, or, hey, sorry, no one's available, we'll get back to you tomorrow, send us an email. It's like,
that's not a live chat. That's not the exact opposite of what live chat's there for. It's for quick, high-level answers, right? That you don't want to spend 5 emails back and forth. It's like, look, I got a quick question, yes or no answer. Do you have someone who can do training in my country? Yes or no? Right? Like, do we need to spend 2 weeks going back and forth to answer that question?
Yeah.
No. Yeah. Here's a link to them. Here, do you want me to introduce you to them via email? What's your email? I'll introduce you. Great team, And in 5 minutes, they've already got an email introduction, and that person's already like, hey, what can I do for you? Let's set up a call. Everything's happening fast now, because like you said, in the last 18 months, we've been trying to do this for a long time, and the companies that have already been doing this, they hit the ground running when the pandemic hit. Well, the companies that have still been playing it old school really got hurt and had to play catch up.
Yes, yes. Well, and this is really, I mean, like Mike said, we are a bit off tangent with the topic, but it's super valuable information to share, because I think that there are a lot of listeners out there in our.
Before you say that, though, we're not off topic in the sense, because you're asking, when does my prospect become a lead, right? And the trigger for them to become a lead is generally when they communicate with us, they're ready to start the sales process. The reason we started live chat is I wanted the lowest amount of barriers for someone to be able to communicate with us. For every touch point we have, human to human, we have a much, much higher % chance of final conversion or of converting them directly through live chat. I'd have to say, I mean, we're only at like 7 or 8% of our inbound are right now converting through live chat, but we are converting through live chats. Or I'll talk to them a live chat, and then 48 hours later, they convert through one of our forms. So
I was just going to ask you what the percentage is. Do you happen to know off the top of your head, like what, like whether live chat interactions have a higher close rate than forms versus?
Oh yeah,
Mm-hmm.
anything else?
1,000%. Yeah, absolutely. And we're not even as aggressive in our live chat as a lot of companies are.
Sure.
I take the passive route, trying to educate more than capture. So it's not just a form, right?
Yeah.
It's like, answer your question first, and then I'll start asking you about yourself. But if I don't need to know who you are and you don't want to tell me, that's okay. And that's one of the greatest things of live chat, right? Is you can stay anonymous so that they don't stick somebody on you. Like, I have a quick question, but I don't want to talk to a salesperson. I just need this question answered, and I can't find it.
That's always my favorite with live chat. I just have a quick question. What's your email address? What's your phone number? Where do you live? It's, oh my God, I'm not dealing with this.
No, don't do that. Just answer my question. Just yes or no, So we try to lead with that, and we try to be very passive about our lead capture that way, which is probably one of the reasons why we don't convert quite as many on live chat, but fits our strategy more.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome.
Well, one of the things that I wanted to say is that in prepping for the show, I went to your LinkedIn page, and something that stuck out to me right in the center was the 3 principles that guide you as a marketer are humanity, transparency, and honesty. And I think that this mini case study here that we just dove into really illustrates that absolutely as who you are as a marketing leader, and kind of your philosophy on the difference between a prospect and a lead, and how you're really teeing up those leads for your sales team, which is in our definition the perfect example of sales and marketing alignment is making sure that the market, those MQLs, the leads that are coming in from marketing are indeed a lead, and they are indeed ready to talk to someone in sales. So I just wanted to put a nice bow on what we just talked about, because it really is. It's not only illustrated in your LinkedIn profile so eloquently, but you also really brought that here to us in this example.
Yeah, I try to live my 3 principles as much as possible, even if it's, I got a product manager who hates when we, when you accidentally say something negative about the company, right? He wants everything to be, flowers and roses, which is, I understand you don't want anything poking at your software. I totally get where they're coming from. But when your customer gets their hands on your product, stuff sometimes goes wrong. Not everything's great. Not everything's hunky-dory on their side. They sometimes get frustrated. And if you can be transparent about those experiences and say, and own them, really own them, like say, there's something wrong with it. We're trying our best to help you. Don't forget, we've got these support channels if that happens. But yes, if we have a live webinar and the software crashes, instead of making up a bunch of I let the person doing it like, oh gosh, my thing crashed again. This doesn't happen that often, but it does happen. And everyone watching is like, that has happened to me too. Like, that's really annoying. And the guy just picks it up and goes on with it. He's like, one of the things I do that help me keep it from crashing is I do this, that, and the other. And all of a sudden you've turned what could be a negative into, a teaching moment, or a way to connect with your audience.
Well, Ben, I think that's another topic for another time, because let me tell you, no, I love the topic. And I think if we go down this route, we will just never stop, because I think for me, that's a big pet peeve when companies, it doesn't matter what, B2B, B2C, whatever it is, when there is a little snafu, when something doesn't go right, when your vendor or partner or supplier or whoever it is that you're working with doesn't come through in the promise that they made or in the expectation that you have as the client, the worst thing that they can do is deny it or put the onus on the other person, or don't take responsibility, or simply refuse to admit that this was not the best experience. And we've experienced, I'm sure everybody listening today has experienced that.
Big stories are when they try to fight it,
Yes.
It makes the big story. If you just own it and try to fix it, you can bypass a lot of pain, and you can get in front of it. If you talk to a PR company, one of the first things they tell you is if something starts going wrong, you got to get in front of it so you can lead the conversation. Don't let anybody put you on your back foot, because if you're on the back foot, all you're doing is reacting. You have no control over the situation now.
Yes.
You deny that it happened, or you try to fight it saying it's not real, or it's not your fault, or you had nothing to do with it. You're giving your power away. You're giving the whole control away. So
well, it's a matter of trust, and trust is so important, especially these days. And I think it's one of the things that we do we try to even make it even more front and center, like when we work with clients in terms of like case studies and things like that. I mean, the general format of a case study is, okay, here's how awesome we are, problem, solution, results. And it's like, okay, but I guarantee you there were blips on the road there when you got to that result. Like, let's talk about those, because if you put that up front, people that see it go, oh, well, if they're honest about that, and like that trust factor just goes through the roof. Versus everybody knows your case study is going to be just the cream of the crop, like the best thing you ever did. So it's even like things like that I think people don't think about. It's always, oh, let's just talk about the great things. And there is value to some of those negative things.
Well, Mike, we do want to talk about the great thing that Ben implemented. Let's get back to the proof.
Tell us about,
yes,
let's talk about
let's talk about your case study. So we introed back into the beginning of the show that it was around a content strategy. So, and you shared with us some really exciting and high-hitting stats on that. Tell us, what was the campaign all about? Why were you having to, come up with it, and kind of set the stage of what it was and what you were tasked with?
Years ago, right? And I'm in a small company, so like many small companies, your marketing department said, make leads, do what you need to do, right? And then if I need money, I put together, a project with a cost associated with that project. We try to push that through. So I'm not really given a top budget, and I'm not given a ton of direction from the top, which actually gives me the ability to go out there and find what the best practices are and what could probably work best for us, implement that, instead of, just going through a robotic process or something that might have been passed down from somebody who doesn't specialize in that. And we kind of caught we were listening and really got the feel that content marketing was really where things were going a number of years ago, I think in 2012. And you could really feel that, companies like Google and even, Bing and the other search engines were starting to really crack down on black hat practices for SEO and really pushing people to just drive out content and provide content to your audience, and they're going to reward you with SEO for that content, for the right content. So then I looked at our company internally and I was like, okay, so I need to start creating a content generation engine within the company by putting together some special purpose teams. Well, we've never done anything like that before. And if you go talk to somebody whose job it's been to, model in CAD or to program with software and say, hey, I need you to write 4 articles a week for the next 10 years. They're going to look at you like you're absolutely crazy, and they should. That's not going to work. You can't just start assigning people content tasks and expect them to hit the ground running and be all excited about it, especially if you're in the manufacturing sector like I am. You got to find other ways to do it. So I was trying to find some other way to create content that could then feed, the other channels, and then find a good way to present that content to our audience. So through a partnership, I was able to get into a webinar and do a webinar with one of my modelers, and they showcased, a model and how it worked and went through it and explained everything really good. And I had this nice video afterwards, and I clipped it into little pieces, and then I used a transcript to write articles. And then I went back to our website, and I was like, well, all the things they said basically explained our product how we wanted it explained. So now I know what to put on my web page too. And I used pictures from the webinar for our product picture. So I basically created one 45-minute webinar and got over 20 content pieces from it, right? That I could then feed through my multiple channels. And if there's a certain, and then I started doing keyword research, right? And this is where the voice of the customer came up, where internally I had internal players telling me that, here's what our product does. And I'm listening to the words they're using. I'm like, I don't know, everything you're saying is 100% right. Because the people I work with are experts, high-level experts in their field. They know what they're doing. But the problem we have is our customers don't actually know what we're doing or how to do it yet, right? They're not experts in what we do. Okay, they're experts maybe in engineering as a whole or a certain kind of engineering. They want to implement what we do into their process, but they haven't learned how to do it yet. So they don't know what it's called. They don't know what everything's called. They don't speak the language of our particular terms yet. So if we use our terms, and we're a small niche business, if you're massive, like a $15 billion company, you can create your own terms and those will become search options on SEO. You could do that. We've got industry partners that have done that. But as a small company, you need to ride the waves. So you need to listen to your customers and use their terms for what you do, not your internal terms. Once you bring them into your ecosystem, you want your ecosystem to take their term and your term and use them in the same places so you can start equating the two together and start that training. So when they talk to your salespeople and your engineer who's doing a demo uses your internal terms, they're like, oh, is that what this is? And they're like, yeah, except it's that, but more specifically, it takes it to the next level. And now you're educating your audience, but you can't get them to you by using your own terms. You got to use their language. And finding that out isn't always simple, right? You might have to talk to your salespeople and get them to let you listen into sales calls or sales meetings. And that can be hard because, a lot of times they're making these meetings on the fly or things are happening, or they may not want someone listening to them because, it feels a little bit too big brother. So what I found is our in-person events that we do, that we have a booth at, I like to use for something other than just straight lead generation, right? Those are your opportunity to talk to 70 prospects or even people who might not be prospects but are in your industry, one-on-one, one after the other. So the first thing is you follow your 3 key concepts of marketing, right? Human, transparent, honest. So you don't stay in the aisle and just start badgering everybody. Instead, you approach everybody like a human. Ask them about their day, how they're experiencing the event. Let them talk about themselves and don't just hammer them with your elevator pitch, right? And then say, hey, we kind of do this. What do you think about that? Are you doing anything like that? And let them tell you what they're doing that they think is relevant to what you do. And listen to how they describe it. And that's how you have to describe it on your website and in your collateral. Don't make your internal people talk about it that way. You can try to get them to reference it, but this isn't like change how everybody in your company talks. This is how do you get the customer into your front door, comfortably. Yeah. And I found that was the most powerful tool I had. User conferences. If you ever have a user conference, it's like, it's gold. Make sure you have a beer budget that's out the window because you need to be taking every moment. You need to be taking someone out for beers and getting them talking to you. Because I've learned so much from just listening to our customers at conferences, what they hate about our software, what they love about our software, what they love about us, what they don't like about us, and what they did before us, and even listening how they talk about us, because a lot of times they'll translate what we do into their own internal language. And that's what you're trying to get at as a marketer, right? That's what I'm after.
And I'm just shaking my head at everything you're saying because we actually experienced that internally at Proofpoint. We had some language on our site about, actually it's still there because we haven't yet updated it and that's on me to do.
That's the point I'm getting to.
Oh, okay. Yeah. And so I'm curious because you mentioned something and I wanted to talk to you about it. You said, you don't have to get your internal team to change the way they talk. But I'm curious because if the website, anybody's website is their 24/7 salesperson to some extent.
Yes.
It's their first brand ambassador out there on the web that's working for them day and night across the globe. When you're making changes to the way that you talk about the company or you talk about the product or the brand, and it's not something that's necessarily adopted internally, what are you doing as a marketer to make sure that your colleagues that are in other parts of the, maybe not marketing, but sales or customer service or you're not in manufacturing specifically, but, tech and software. Yeah. How are you taking the learnings that you gleaned from those user events and talking to your customers? How are you taking that and making sure that everybody in the company is on board with that or is aware of those things?
So 2 things. One, when they get in front of the customer asks using this language, right? So when our salesperson or our engineer are in the meeting with the customer is going to use that language, and the salesperson, our salespeople are quite good. They're going to say, okay, what do you mean by that? And then they'll say, okay, great. So we do that plus more, and we call it this. Because when you have a one-on-one with somebody, you now have the opportunity to educate them and define your terms. If you're just presenting something to them or you're trying to catch them with SEO, don't think you're not educating them yet. You got to get them in the door first before you can educate them, right? They have to realize that you do what they want first, and then you can educate them on your terms and your language. So almost like I let the customer educate them a lot of times. The second thing, and that also is nice because when we get onto the wave of a new process or a new big keyword, like right now, model-based definition is all the rage for good reason, because it's a good way to define, incorporating everything together so everything talks, right? And everyone internally was like, it's kind of a fad, or we don't do that, or we're not really a part of that, or we're part of something more specific. I'm like, guys, this is what we do. We're a part of this. Relax. And the customer keeps coming to them and saying, hey, you're part of our model-based definition rollout. Look at how you can fit in. Look at how we can do this. And it's like the customer educated them on the marketing terms, and then they educated the customer on our specific internal terms. So the two could then mesh together. That's one way to do it. And the other way to do it, kind of a sneakier way to do it, is by influencing your content creation. So since I use webinars as a lead for our content creation, I have a lot of influence on what the webinar titles are and how the content kind of fits. So I can feed those terms into the titles and the content of our webinars so that our presenters are like, okay, I see you're using that. What does that mean? I'll explain it to them, and then they'll kind of build that into their presentation. And I have a big thing on like 20-80, 20% PowerPoint, 80%, live, whatever it is you can do that's not PowerPoint. We try very hard to do that when we can. So, even in the PowerPoint, I'm like, here, use this one slide as an intro on how we fit into this MBD process before you go into talking about what specifically we do. So those are the 2 ways I kind of try to communicate internally. But if someone's an expert on what they do, you can't show up and say, hey, you've been calling everything the wrong thing. Use these words instead. You can't do that. You got to say, hey, this is kind of what we're trying to feed into. Can you just incorporate this a little bit into what you're doing? And then the customer's going to tell them what they call it and what they think it is. And they're going to have to match what we do internally to what the customer thinks anyway in the sales meeting. But they won't ever make it to the sales meeting unless I use the customer's terms to get them there.
This very much reminds me of like when this was a while ago when like 3D printing was just kind of becoming big.
Oh goodness!
I was working on Stratasys was the company. We were like their people were like, oh yeah, it's FDM. Like, yeah, no, everyone just calls it 3D printing, no matter whether they're a maker or like the $2 billion company that needs your machines.
That's it.
Whatever.
That's exactly what I'm talking about. And then when they get in front of the customer, like, look, we do 3D printing, but more specifically, we do FDM, which let me show you why it's better than what you might think it is and what it specifically is. Let me define it for you. And now the customer's like, oh yeah, that's what we want. That's what we want to do, and then you're able to educate them then on the terms that better define what it is specifically you do. Right. But you're not going to get them there unless you say, we do 3D printing, They're like, yeah, I want to do 3D printing. Yeah. But they might not know anything about it yet, so.
Yeah. Your
So what-
approach.
Go ahead, Gabby.
Go ahead. No, go ahead. Go ahead.
I want to kind of get into some of the details around like what types of content. Like, okay, you mentioned all the way back to 2012. You found this opportunity. You mentioned webinars already. That's a big part of what you do.
Mm-hmm.
What else? Like, what other types of content are we talking? Blogs?
Yeah,
Are we talking white papers? Like, what else are you doing to get people?
Element that was really important to me, and that was the keys to the castle. So, when I first started here, we had a third-party host for our website, and it meant that I had to kind of like put stuff through them in order to get changes in the website. On big companies, naturally, you're going to have to go through a whole process in order to update your web pages. That makes sense. But trying to get as close to that end point as possible, I feel is very, very important for a marketing team, because you want your website to be a living, breathing thing. And I'm not just talking about your blog, which should be, constantly updating. I'm not just talking about your video channel. I mean, your core web pages need to be alive. And you can only do that if you're able to update them regularly. And you want to update them regularly, because your products change, the conversations with your customers change, your content needs to stay up to date. So the second thing I did was kind of take over our content management system for our website, so I can do fast updates to our web pages, sometimes too fast for my own good, and things get put up that aren't, maybe ready yet. But I prefer to err on the getting content out there rather than being so cagey with it that you end up leaving a desert, where people aren't going to be interested, because you want people
progress, not perfection.
Yes, exactly. Because the whole point of a website is you want people to come back. If they come to your website once, they can see everything in 5 minutes. They're not going to come back. And if they're not going to come back, they're not going to convert, because you don't convert on the first time someone visits your website. That's not how. Nobody does that. No one. I mean, it's like window shopping, right? Your first visit's your window shop, and then the second visit is when you go into the store and start actually touching and looking at things. So you want your website to be alive. So every time someone comes back, they're like, oh, this is new, or this is different, or I didn't see this before, or this tells me a little bit about more what I'm interested in. And the blog is the most powerful way to do that, but you need your core pages also living and breathing, which then brings me to the content, right? So you got to build multiple content channels, and you want to bleed over without copying. So, we've got our video channel. So I use clips from our webinars and from demos that we do there. And then we have our on-demand webinars, which are farther down the pipeline, right? So a little closer to the close stage, rather than as high in the funnel as something like a 2-minute video. And so those are form gated, but all those clips are not. So you can find those in search, you can just find them on YouTube, and you can watch them without having to go through any steps. The same thing with our brochures. So we've got our brochure text sheets. We've got our short articles, which are, 2-3 pages. We have our white papers, which are much more technical in nature. And then we've got even some of our white papers presented in 1-hour videos, right? Mm-hmm. And that creates a clear delineation down the funnel of the interest level of your particular prospects. And in my opinion, you want to gate only at the middle of the funnel and below, right? Because I feel like the people are so excited about big data that they're like, I want to collect as much data as I absolutely possibly can, as often as I can. And then you ask them, okay, what are you doing with it? And they're like, well, we don't do anything with it until they get to this point. I'm like, okay, so anytime someone wants to touch your site at all, you're asking for their name, their email, their phone number, and their address. When they want to look at a text sheet and they're not even sure that you fit what they're looking for. I'm like, that doesn't make any sense. So we don't even gate our brochures and our text sheets. You click on the link, you just get it. Because I'm not going to put you into a drip campaign yet. I'm not going to start hammering you with emails. I don't.
On the flip side, that's the worst part of it, right? Where they'll do that and they'll still put them into the drip campaign, or even worse yet, kick them over to sales. Say, hey, they downloaded a white paper. Their lead score is 50. Go. Bombard them with phone calls. It's like, oh God.
Yeah. Don't do it yet. It's too soon. You're interrupting. Now you want to maybe you can do something to guide them. So if you have a really light drip campaign, maybe, but not till they've hit a score of 30, I guess, and downloaded like 12 brochures and a white paper and some other. Okay, they're interested, and the first part of the drip campaign should be, hey, did you find everything you're looking for? Here's a link to more content you might not have seen, right? That should be the first bit. And then the second bit, if you can, say, try to relate it to what they're looking at or who they are. Now, since we have a small team, I can't get as granular as I love to be. I got all these dreams of yada, yada, I can't do it. So for our drip campaigns, they're all pretty light, but my conversion for those is to get people to sign up for a webinar, right? Where they can see something hands-on. We have live Q&A during the webinars, which I got 3 people just chatting with the audience during the webinar, quietly on the side.
So again, really quick, just to make sure everybody got it, is what you're saying is early on, whatever content they look at, once there's a form, your drip campaign is to get them to sign up for the webinar. It's not to kick them over to sales.
Correct. My conversion there is to get them on a webinar, right? So once I can get them into my webinars, I build my webinars as a series, a yearly series. So if you sign up to one, you've signed up for the whole series, right? You can unsubscribe anytime you want, but it also means for my long-term customers, they don't want to have to keep checking back. Like, look, I want to see all your stuff. Just give me all your stuff, right? Like, I don't want to go back to your website, know who you are. I know everything about that. I've been using your software for 10 years, but I like the webinars. Can I just sign up for all the webinars? So to appease those, they sign up once, or I sign them up once for them with their permission, right? GDPR, yada, 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 right? Don't run around signing people up for stuff. They have an opt-in to what I call my, I forget, I have like a little club I keep of all of my like power users who want everything that we produce. And they're automatically set to sign up for everything we do. So they don't have to keep checking back because they're busy. They got a job. But for other prospects, like as soon as I get them into the webinar, now they have a chance to basically see a demo. And almost all of our webinars are not high level. They tend to be mid or lower levels. They're technical. They've got real meat and juice. There's something heavy and thick. So you're going to see something cool or powerful, it's going to be one of our senior engineers on there. So if you ask them a question, I've got them. I've got a product manager, in support. So I've got like high level people who can answer all your questions. And from there, most of the time when people see a webinar, they're like, oh, that was pretty cool, but I wonder if it does this, or I wonder if it does that. So then they go back to our website, and now they've got questions in their head, right? You've piqued their curiosity. Now they're starting to really kind of get more interested. And sometimes it takes longer than others, but a lot of times they'll go back to the website and they're like, oh, you've got 140 webinars on demand that I can sort by topic. I'm like, yeah. So now they can pick and choose a couple that are a little bit more specific to maybe what they're looking for. And now they're ready, like, okay, I got more questions about this. Maybe I should talk to somebody, right? But that's my core foundation, is get them to sign up for the webinar. And now I feel comfortable drip campaign, feeding them stuff, and watching them.
So let me ask you a quick question here, Ben. So you mentioned earlier in the conversation that once they sign up for one webinar, they're signed up for all of them. So question for you, how many webinars do you produce in a year? And when do you plan the content for each webinar? Do you have like a planning day where you plan all of them out, or are you planning them on a quarterly basis? Kind of tell us how.
Yeah, that's actually a really good question. So we try to do a minimum of 13 a year. Some years it's more, some it's less. This year we had a global technology conference, one of our user conferences we did virtually. So we did 34 in a week and a half, which was a lot. In fact, too much. But I got greedy on content because I was like, look at all this stuff we can make.
The marketer's dilemma, right? Too much content, too much.
But I try to do 13 a year, give or take, and we try to take a month or two off during the summer, and it's the last Thursday of every month, like clockwork. All right, every last Thursday, and then some of our hot months we'll sneak one in at the beginning of the month, like the second week, which will be a supplemental topic. And then what I do is I meet with, I set campaigns or series. So even though it's my 2021 series, I'll have 3 or 4 webinars that will share a general topic. And so I'll meet with somebody in the company, I'll pull them in who's an expert on that topic or who I'm going to be leveraging as a presenter, and we'll have a sit down, we'll brainstorm the topics for it. And then it'll give me a general content calendar we'll put out there to start generating interest with some brief write-ups. And as we get closer to each event, a lot of times it changes a little bit, based on if we have somebody else present, or if something's changed in our software, or, So it's like those aren't necessarily set in stone, but I try to stick to them. And I try to be at least 6 months out if I can. I found that being more than 6 months out just hasn't been feasible.
Sure.
For us as a small company. A larger company, I see a lot of our larger friends and industry partners and such, they're out, 12, 13 months, which is wonderful. But since I'm the marketing department, we do it with what we got, and 6 months tends to be pretty good. Anything farther than that, your customers aren't really paying attention anyway.
Right.
You're just kind of dog-earing the resources and trying to get on people's calendars internally, not necessarily externally yet, but internally. So that way, your training manager doesn't schedule that person for training, so they don't get put on a big project. And if they do, it sets off a flag, and they come to you like, hey, I was scheduled for this thing. I got this other thing. What do we do now?
Right.
Instead of you just getting like the day before and they're like, oh, yeah, I forgot about this. I didn't realize I was doing it, and I got scheduled for something else, and now I have to backtrack on the customer. The last thing you ever want to have to do is retract anything or move dates. You want to do your absolute best not to move the date or cancel an event. If you have to change the topic or change the presenter, okay, have a backup. But don't move the date and don't cancel it, right? Because then you're eroding trust.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, and I think 6 months is a really good, when we think about content calendars for our clients, or even internally at Proofpoint, 2 quarters, 6 months seems like a good amount of time, because you want to also put things out that are timely, that are important to your customer, and things, as we all know, things can change very quickly. So sometimes having a 12 to 13 month calendar, while it is convenient, may not always be relevant once you get to month 8.
This is something that's another hot tip for marketers, especially if you have a small team. What I do in every January, the beginning of January, every January, is I do a all right. It's very loose and it's very general. So a lot of times I'll just use like a long tail keyword as a topic for something, right? Or I'll say, we put out a new product release every year. And generally we do at least 3 events around that product release. So I'll say, okay, so my August, September, October webinars are product release. I'll just put that in there, right? Because especially on a small team, brainstorming doesn't work as well as shooting down straw. You go to a sales meeting or you go in front of your CEO and you just say, hey, I want to do a webinar next month. What should we do it on? You're going to walk out disappointed. All right. You're not going to come to something. You're going to be wasting everyone's time. It's not going to work out the way you want it to. Instead, you want to walk in and say, hey, next month, I have it in my content calendar. We're doing a webinar on this. Is that possible? And they'll be like, oh, well, that's kind of like this other thing. Why don't we do it on this instead? Or, hey, we have this other person free. Maybe they could do it. But they don't really know much about that. Should they get trained? Right? You need to have a straw man for your sales team and your management team to shoot at or burn down on you. But always walk into the meeting with something on a piece of paper, like here's what we're doing. And tell them that, right? Because if you're leading the marketing group, you're a decision maker too. Don't play it too passive. Just get in front of them and say, here's what we're going to do. How do we make this work? And they will respond. They might fight you on it. Like every one of my meetings with management looks like a battle, but I always walk out with a smile on my I've got decisions made. It's not a bunch of yes men just like, oh, this one's fine. It's like, no, that won't work. We have to do this instead. And I'm like, fine, we'll do that instead. I walk out like, okay, well, this is what we're going to do. I've got something to do, so we're good to go in my calendar.
So bottom line, if you're leading a team of content marketers, or you are the team that leads content marketing, have a plan, even if it changes, even if your internal SMEs are going to say, no, this topic, at least you are presenting the plan rather than asking for permission.
To talk about, right? You got something to talk about. And you're right. You're not just asking permission to do something. You're saying we're already going to do something. Something's going to happen. In my mind, this is what it is. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah.
And I mean, you're probably working with subject matter experts. I work with a lot of 20-year veteran engineers who know more about engineering than I will ever possibly know in my lifetime.
Well, then you could engineer on TV, that for sure.
We attend conferences just to get people at our door, and then I hand them off to someone smarter than me. But they want something to talk to, right? So throw something up there, and if it doesn't really make sense, have them explain to you why it doesn't make sense and take notes.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Have them teach you their language. But yeah, always walk in with something, you know? And so at the beginning of the year, I try to put something like that together, knowing that most of the topics I just put together are never going to exist, but it gives us somewhere to start.
I think it's brilliant advice for any, any marketing leader that's leading content, big or small company, B2C or B2B. This show is B2B, but I think it applies to any marketer out there.
Yeah, I think it's definitely for any marketer out there, no matter where you are, because we even do it with I'm thinking like our process. I mean, we generally have our clients respond to something rather than just doing a flat out brainstorm. Like, hey, here's content strategy. Here's what we think. What do you think doesn't fit? Or what do you think is missing? Yes. Rather than, hey, never going to get there.
As a marketing company, I'll tell you what, one of the things that annoys me the most is if a marketing firm comes to me and they just don't have anything, right? Mm-hmm. They come to you and they're like, okay, now you tell us what we're going to be doing. And I'm like, I hired you to help me get this figured out. I'm going to do it myself. Like, why are you even in this room? Like, I can do this. I'm good, you know?
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah, bring something initially, even if what you bring to the table is wrong, or you just copied it from the competition, right? Like, because then you're like, here's what your competition's doing. How powerful is that? Do you want to align to that same messaging, or are they going a different direction than you, right?
Yeah.
So, that's real important. I mean, one of the first things we did is we took a look at what our competition was doing, what they were winning on, and that gives you a good place to start if you don't have anything to start with.
I think as marketers, we do this internally, and I think it's immensely important whether whatever working with. If you're in marketing and you're not doing an industry scan at least once a month to look at not just competitors, but other companies in the space that may be similar to you, but not necessarily competing on the same clients or same industry, but just looking at what a competitor or industry landscape. If you're not doing that once a month,
in that too, and I think it's what you're saying, just in a different way of saying it. I think your customers are doing and talking about, right? Mm-hmm. So it's not so much what your competitors and what your industry is, but what are your customers doing? So we're tied, deeply into manufacturing. So everyone we talk to is a manufacturer. So what are they trying to do? What are they talking about? What is going on with them? Because they're the people you want to talk to. So find out what they're talking about and then align yourself to that.
Yeah. Well, Ben, let's kind of recap here for our campaign initiative that you
let me summarize it for you. All right.
Sure, go ahead, please do.
We had an old website and no content. So because we didn't have any content creation internally, I started with webinars and used those as a way to comfortably use the people that are used to doing demos into doing presentations that I could then take up those apart to use for all of our different content channels in a different way. And as my people became more and more comfortable doing webinars, I could do more and more of them on a broader range of topics. I can turn that into a paper. I can turn that into a series of small clips. I have a webinar on demand. I have a web page. I have a blog post, multiple blog posts. So you can do one about it coming up, one about it afterwards, and you can do about one of each of the video clips, even if you want to. So you can create a great deal amount of content from something as simple as that. So you need to create a content creation strategy. And then I got my hands on the website and the keys to the website. So I could update it myself quickly and regularly. So now our website, and constantly updating, which not only SEO loves, but it gets your customers coming back. And those two things together create a content marketing strategy that brought our customers back over and over again and feeds them new content every month that they're interested in and that is important to them. So that way, it's not just a dead thing that sits there and waits.
Absolutely. And just for our listeners, Ben's content to the website and the blog by over 1,000%. Is that correct?
Yeah, you should see our numbers from our user conference week. Woo!
Wow.
That was exciting.
Awesome. Well, you've showed us the proof. Now it's time for the part of the show where we get to the point. And here we encourage our listeners to do this at home, right? You often hear TV shows or warning says don't do this at home. Well, we're the opposite. Experts to this show, marketing leaders and top marketing leaders in the B2B space, to tell our audience exactly how they can replicate their revenue generating strategy. So let's break down this even further. We talked a little bit about this, how, come January, you're putting together a 12-month very high level at this point, still very high level of the topics. And sometimes this could be based on a keyword or events happening in the company. One is having at least the shell of a content strategy or topics in place.
That also says what channels you want to do, right? So you're deciding in January what channels you want to do. So I say, okay, we're going to be doing a blog this year. We're doing webinars this year. And then I've got, here's the web updates we'll be doing on which month. And I title those as a campaign too, because I don't ever update the whole website at once, except like once every 5 years, right? But you'll say, okay, I'm doing this product this month because we've got a new product release the month before. So that tells you what channels you're going to be having and rough ideas of what things you're going to be doing in those channels, right? And that kind of gets you in the right headspace so you don't get overwhelmed. And then you can tie it together. So I got my webinar set for February. So that means my first blog post in February promotes that webinar. My second blog post promotes content related to that webinar we've done before. My third blog post is after the webinar, right? So it gives you a brief about the webinar and gives you a link to watch it on demand. My fourth blog post breaks a little white paper or something like that, or a different content piece, explaining maybe what, and maybe in deeper, more technically, what we showed in the webinar, right? And all in that. Now you can even pull that from a training manual,
Yeah, and I'm wondering, Ben, if you can tell us a little bit about how you determine what channels you're going to prioritize for your marketing efforts.
Sure. So in my opinion, you got to be careful you don't overload your team. In my case, I have a small team, a series of free agents I tap into as I need to so I can expand my team. I have some writers I work with if I need some content real quick. I have an event planner I can call if I need some help on that regard. I got a couple of creatives I can call if I need some creative work that I can't do myself. So I can operate, even though I'm one person, as a much larger team. And having this content calendar kind of gives me an idea also of which agents I'm going to need to use. But you want to kind of start at the base level. Right? It's digital now, more so than it was before, and it was a lot before. The first thing you want to do is make sure your website's up to date and you've got website updates, right? Because that's your company online, and that's your face to the customer. Second, you want to make sure you've got a blog. And with a blog, the most important thing is consistency. Second most important thing is content, right? So you want good content, but it's almost more important just to be consistent and get something out there and done. Just have constant stuff going out there. If you don't have a good piece of content, talk about something you did before, recycle something, right? But blogs are extremely important. They're weighted heavier than web pages when it comes to SEO. So they're very, very powerful for capturing keywords, especially ones that have a lot of competition. So your blog is going to be your masterpiece, Trojan horse weapon that you can use, especially if you've got big competitors. And then video. Videos are enormous. Webinars, everyone is getting into webinars now. And a lot of people were getting into it before, but the bee's knees. And webinars, you want to, don't make them all PowerPoint, and if you are do you have to make them PowerPoint? Do this, right? Have a person's face on it. But you can use webinars to generate all of your other content, right? And they're not as hard as they seem. You have to jump off the dock into the water and just do them. Even if you have nobody sign up for it, still do it. Don't cancel it if you have 0 signups. Still do it. Follow up on the live webinar are icing on the cake, right? They're fantastic, but what you should be after is that recorded video. That's the magic treasure box, right? So don't cancel it just because nobody signed up. Nobody's going to sign up for your first webinar. My first webinar, I had 4 people attend, right? My last webinar, I had, we had 188 people attend one, and we had 1,000 people sign up for it. And that's 8 years difference, but we get an average of 60 B2B. We count that as fantastic. But we get those content pieces afterwards, and those live forever. So don't back away. Don't be shy.
That's extremely important, because a lot of the time you'll get, especially the sales team or somebody going, oh, how many people signed up? Oh, do we really want to do it? What did we do wrong? It's like, well, it doesn't matter. Just do the thing and take the content, because that does so much more after the fact.
Yeah, because if you just do one webinar during the year and expect everybody to sign up for it, that's not realistic.
You said everybody's doing them, so we're all bombarded with webinar invitations from every email list that we're part of and every company we follow. And
be expected that you're gonna have 4 times your viewership on demand than you are gonna have live. And what about if you're international? We're an international company. I've got customers in South Korea, China, Japan. If I have a webinar at 11 a.m. here, they're not gonna be here at 1 o'clock in the morning in Japan watching it. It's realistic. So you can make that on demand and have that interested, so make sure it goes through. Go through with it. If you log out from underneath your customers every single time you get a snafu, they're not going to trust you to do anything, and they're not going to sign up for stuff.
I'm wondering, Ben, because one of the things that I was talking about on another episode for this show with another one of our guests was the fact that kind of along what you're saying, that even if you don't have a ton of signups, or you do have signups but not a lot of people, do you have any stats, or even if it's anecdotal, of people that signed up for a webinar, ended up not being able to attend for one reason or another, but then consumed the content afterwards at their own leisure? Do you have some stats around what that percentage is?
The number is 30-40. Okay, so 30 to 40% of your signups will show up to the live event. The rest will either watch it on demand or not watch it at all, which is why you want to make sure you have that after email with the putting it in front of their face to remind them of it. Because I sign up for a lot of webinars and I forget about them, right?
Sure.
And I get my email, I'm like, oh, maybe I do want to check that out. But if you expect more than 30 or 40% of your signups to show up to the live event, you're lying to yourself. People are busy. They got other stuff to do, right?
And things like last minute stuff comes up, and the webinar from company XYZ is always bottom of the priority list.
Who cares? If you only have 4 people show up, make it the best event possible for those 4 people. Then those 4 people are gonna be like, wow, these are awful. I'm never coming back to one of these. And then word of mouth get out too.
So I love that the webinar as a channel and as a content stream is it sounds like your main vehicle for nurturing your prospects and converting prospects to leads.
Sure.
Tell us a little bit about how you just said make that webinar the best experience they can have. Tell us a little bit about how you best webinar for your listeners. Like what are some tips or tricks? Yeah.
Sometimes I get nervous too, and sometimes I eat the frog and I do the wrong things. So that's okay. You got to get over that. You're going to say something dumb during your webinar. You're going to sound like a robot the first few. Okay. So for me, the most important thing is something that you guys told me at the beginning of this. Make it conversational, right? People don't want to listen to a robot. They want to see a person. Also, and you guys are like perfect at doing this, is I never have one presenter for a webinar, ever. I always have what I call the color commentary. So I have somebody assigned to that webinar who their job is to present nothing at all. Their job is to sign on, listen, and to jump in and add additional points to the presenter, ask the presenter, or discuss something a little bit more detailed the presenter might have said.
Yeah.
And it becomes almost like a radio show, like a radio talk show. And if you've ever listened to radio, most popular, the one where you have one guy or one woman who gets on and they're it, or you've got a cast of like 3 ridiculous characters playing off of each other.
Right, right.
Sitcom. People love them.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for that compliment, by the way. Mike and I have had some experience both at work and outside of work. But I completely agree with you. I think that, if you look, you don't have to look too far in our pop culture to see that Fire and Ice, Laurel and Hardy and Tom and Jerry and Mike. What's another one that I'm not thinking of right now? But
I don't know. You stumped me. I wasn't ready for that one.
So Starsky and Hutch.
There we go.
You always have. There's always.
There's always
right. There's always like, exactly. And I like that strategy. I think that definitely humanizes the webinar, because you know what, they can get pretty tedious when it's just a monotone or a monologue, not monotone.
Oh God, reading off slides, my biggest pet peeve. Ooh, right? And they're just going through it. You're like, oh goodness, I don't have time for this.
Right.
And you either minimize it or you leave, right? And then there's not real value in there. Plus, then when you try to reuse it later, you got all these boring clips, right? I got some real characters at my company, and they are phenomenal. And they train a lot of our customers, so our customers know them and have joked out around with them, or we've gone to beers together. I had one of our customers during the Q&A session was sending me like jokes to play on one of the presenters. So we were kind of playing some practical jokes on one of the presenters during the event. And me and one of our customers were just laughing the whole time about it. And just having some fun with it, because people presenting to people, right? Like
Yeah.
I think it's really important that you bring this up, because there's a lot of content and conversations out there about, how do you make the best, the best virtual event, the best webinar, and this, that, and the other. And there's a lot of focus on the technology. Sure, there's some of that, like there maybe a little bit, but the reality is, if you have to make it, like you said, you have to make it human.
Exactly. I mean,
people like other people.
Quality, and that made a big difference. I got to admit that, sometimes the technology is important.
Yeah.
But no, you want to make it entertaining
to a certain level.
Yeah, it's still got to be entertaining.
Well, and I like what you said, Ben, about bringing in the characters of your company. I think the greatest, it's been said before, not by me, but by everyone, that I say it too, is that the company is their team. And if you've got some individuals on your team that have a phenomenal presentation style, or they're just super funny, or they're goofy, or they can sing show tunes or Disney tunes, and exactly.
So Ben, I want to ask you one last question.
I have one last question.
Okay, so we're gonna ask you two last questions. Before we go to the lightning round. You mentioned, we just mentioned the team, and you mentioned a couple of, I forget, did you call them hired guns or freelancers? I forget what you call them.
Freelancers. Yeah, that's pretty much.
But within how do you get those subject matter experts within your team to help out with the marketing? Like, what is it that you? Because I think a lot of, especially companies that are similar to you, will struggle with that. Like, how do you get the subject matter experts who are, especially if it's like a service-based company where they're literally their hourly rate is, dependent, doing the actual work.
We're a service team that is part of our service company. And so it started with tapping the demo people that are part of the sales group that support the sales people, right? Find your demo jockeys, because they're used to being in front of a customer and doing a presentation. Start with their recordings, okay? And get them to do your first few webinars. And you might have to fight somebody, but treat it like it's a sales, talk to them like this is a sales presentation, it's a sales demo. We're gonna do the sales demo. We're trying something new. Get the people who are used to doing sales demos. And then show dividends, right? To your CEO. And then your CEO will be like, oh, this is awesome. We need to do a bunch more of these. And then try to have your other people then say no once your CEO is like, this has to be done, right? But it is a lot of grooming and getting people used to it and comfortable with it. So I coach the presenters when I bring them into it. Like, even if I'm super nervous, I try not to let it show. I remind them to breathe. Don't put your hand near your mouth. And if I can, I try to be in the same room as they are when we're doing the event, so I can sit next to them and almost, I'm not holding their hand, but I'm holding their hand, right? Because it's scary. You got 70 people watching you and what you're doing and listening to what you're doing. It's terrifying for a lot of people, especially technical people. Right. And so you got to make it as easygoing and fun as possible. for the longest time, I was the color commentary because I couldn't get a second person assigned to it, right? We didn't have the people or the man hours. Now I've got 3 people that do every webinar with me because it's gotten so much value now in the company that I have somebody that all they do is the Q&A chat. I got someone doing color commentary and I got someone presenting, and then I just do the intro now, right? And get out of the way. But before I used to do the intro, the color commentary, the Q&A session, the chat Q&A, I did all of that, and have some questions ready, for that first one, poke them a little bit. Be like, oh, hey, you mentioned that. Could you tell us a little bit more about that? Just, grab the person who's most comfortable first and then coach everybody else into it. And pretty soon you'll have a good rotation going.
Absolutely.
And make it fun.
Yeah.
Fun.
Yep. Well, I did have another question, but you know what? I'll save it for another time because you really, you really brought us, you showed us the proof, you got to the point, you shared with us and our audience some really valuable lessons about, first and foremost, how you're nurturing your prospects into leads, how you're really building that alignment with your sales team, your strategy in your content creation, using webinars as your main vehicle and kind of dispersing that webinar, that giant, piece of content into other channels and into other pieces of content. So I think that you've shared a ton of great value with us. So I'm not going to ask another question because I think you, like I said, you showed us the proof, you got to the point. So we're going to ask you a couple of questions here. Very easy. Just kind of off the top of your head, whatever comes to mind is kind of the vibe we're looking for. So question number 1 is, what's the main KPI you use to evaluate marketing success?
Close deals.
Okay. What's a new marketing strategy or tactic that you're looking to test out this year?
Better connection between our systems so I can do better cradle-to-grave tracking of our opportunities from lead to close.
Okay.
And assign money that we've generated to my campaigns, automated instead of having to crunch the numbers.
Yep. What's a tool or platform you use in your work that you couldn't live without?
HubSpot. I'm a HubSpot junkie. So there are other platforms that do it too, but I love HubSpot. It's made
All
it real.
right. HubSpot, if you're listening, we'd love some sponsorship of this podcast. What you can answer this in one of 2 ways. What is your favorite or what is your least favorite business word or phrase?
Oh, my favorite and least favorite is synergy. When I use it a lot, though, as a way to point out when someone's using jargon. A lot of times people will try to make them sound smarter by using jargon or try to belittle someone with jargon. And you just got to get over the fact that it's just jargon. They're just using a different language. Once you learn the words, it's not that big a deal. Don't let people intimidate you with it. So, I can say okay, well, synergy, let's move on. Okay.
Yeah. Synergy is one that we hear quite often on this show. So I think marketers and business people out there, let's just strike synergy from our vocabulary.
We're all trying to make teams that work together and do good. I understand that you want to use synergy to talk about that, but really it's about teamwork. That's what makes marketing and sales function nowadays because we're all doing 10 people's jobs.
Yep. Yep. What is your favorite business or marketing book?
So there's an Inbound Marketing by Halligan and Shaw. That was a really nice starter for me. And I think it's by one of the founders of HubSpot. Here, I have a shelf of books I've used and not used. There you go. This one a lot. And then I have a lot of these because they're a good way to get started, but right?
Yep, sure.
I try to be humble and understanding that you don't know what you don't know. And no matter how much you do know, there's still going to be things you don't know. So I'm constantly trying to talk to other marketers and read and figure out what I don't know.
Or what is your favorite martial arts movie?
Oh, the 5 Deadly Venoms. Hands down. 5 Deadly Venoms. It's one of the old Shaw Brothers movies from the golden era of Kung Fu. Because Kung Fu is my dream martial art. I've dabbled in a bunch and I've enjoyed quite a few. and they all have a lot they can teach you. But Kung Fu is my favorite by far. And the 5 Deadly Venoms has a great mix of amazing Kung Fu and incredible cheesiness together.
Nice.
Beer evening. Just if you haven't seen it, you have to see it.
Okay.
It's a good one. I like that one. And then along those same lines, I mean, you kind of mentioned Kung Fu is your favorite, but outside of Kung Fu, if there's a new martial art you could take up and learn right now, what would it be?
Wing Chun. Wing Chun. I got a friend that did Wing Chun, and Ip Man. I don't know if anyone's seen Ip Man. He was Bruce Lee's teacher, and Wing Chun is a very close-in, intense. It was originally thought it was a very passive style, but Chain Fist disagrees. So it's just, I think, especially in a self-defense standpoint, it's a really cool style. It's also the exact opposite of the Kung Fu I took, which is a long fist Kung Fu. So it's very big and big movements. And Wing Chun is very tight and small and intimate, you know? So that's what I would do.
Very cool. Well, Mike is a big martial arts.
Yeah, we could probably have a whole separate episode just on that if we wanted to, but we'll leave that. We'll spare everybody.
We won't do that. This is a B2B marketing podcast. So, Ben, we know you have to run soon, so we want to be sensitive to that. Well, thank you so much for joining us today on the show, and thank you for telling us a little bit more about your revenue generating content strategy that has helped so much at DCS. Where can our listeners connect with you?
LinkedIn is the best spot. And I'm always happy to answer questions and chat with other marketers. If you're trying to do something, and you're not sure where to start, I'll give you some advice and before I send you over to Proofpoint, you know? But,
check is in the mail.
Thank you. But, a lot of times people need to get started before they have any money to actually spend on an agency, you know? And so I've tried to help advise anyone I can, who's in that starter position where they don't have any money, but they're trying to get something going so they can get some money to then, get some help.
There are a lot of people out there with that are, a marketing team of one that could really benefit from this episode and anything else you could throw at them. Yeah.
And as marketers, we have to, we're not in we are in competition with each other, but we're really not. We have to have that mentality that we can help more than we help more than take more, and I think that's absolutely right. And LinkedIn is the best place for that, to really create those marketing camaraderie.
Find your local HubSpot group.
Oh, okay.
Major cities and towns. And it's a great place to meet people who do marketing, even if you don't have anything to do with HubSpot and don't want to, go anyway, because a lot of times they'll be talking about stuff that's, agnostic, tool agnostic.
Sure.
So
that's a great recommendation. Well, Ben, thank you so much for joining us today on Show Me the Proof, Get to the Point. And thank you for everyone listening. We will be back next week with another episode.
All right. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Ben.
Thanks for tuning in to the Show Me the Proof, Get to the Point podcast. Join us weekly for new episodes and seriously smart B2B marketing success stories. We'll show you the proof and get to the point every time. Find additional resources on the Proofpoint website, www.proofpoint.marketing, including the full episode library with show notes, guides, templates, and more great resources. If you like this episode, don't forget to subscribe, and please leave us a review on iTunes or wherever you listen to podcasts.